Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 155 of Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this is the third week of February 2025. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the new politics of Donald Trump toward Ukraine. We're also going to cover the rare mineral deal between the US and Ukraine that US is pushing so hard, and we will talk about the if Ukraine can survive without US weapons if Donald Trump decides to stop the delivery of critically important weapons to Ukraine. All right, a month has been since the inauguration of 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, and he has not achieved anything of what he promised and declared so loudly, but on the contrary, he has moved away from the possibility of implementing the tasks set. And the whole world sees this. The whole world sees how much Donald Trump is married in wordplay, leading himself into state of isolationism in relations with Europe and bringing this moment closer in relations with Ukraine. What Trump says, he doesn't always do, but does what he never announced. Therefore, his words do not always correspond to his actions. Just look at two surroundings Donald Trump. G.D. Vance called Trump a Nazi a few years ago, and today he is his vice president. Elon Musk criticized Donald Trump during his first term, and today he's almost the adopted son of 47th President of the United States. As you can see, everything is changing, and as you see, Donald Trump is very unpredictable. Donald Trump. So we must understand that during Trump's second presidency, the United States will no longer be Ukraine's main strategic partner and probably will not be a reliable partner at all. I think that many people are now under the influence of negative emotions after Trump's statements about Zelensky and Ukraine in the last couple of days. And the problem is not so much in the personal attitude of the US president to President of Ukraine, but in his attitude to Ukraine and Russia, to the Russian Ukrainian war. This is what causes a great concern. The immediate motives of Trump's statements are rather an emotion of irritation with Zelensky, who refused to sign the resource agreement proposed by Donald Trump and also allowed himself to criticize the US negotiations with Russia. But unfortunately, something else is also obvious. Trump repeats the narratives of Russian propaganda, believes that the Russian Ukrainian war could have been easily ended. He doesn't understand or does not want to understand that this war could have been ended quickly only in the way when Ukraine surrounds to Russia. It is necessary to understand that during Trump's second presidency, the US will no longer be Ukraine's main strategic partner and most likely will not be a reliable partner at all. So, in the negotiation process, the states will act rather as a conditional neutral mediator. And the degree of neutrality, especially of Trump himself, is still a big question. Therefore, one should not rely on US support in the negotiation process. Given Trump's personal position, there will be great risks in attempts to negotiate peace through greater successions on the part of Ukraine. And what to do in this situation? In general, now it's necessary to significantly adjust the information policy regarding Trump to minimize public dialogue with him. We need to reserve at least the remains of partnership relations with the United States and avoid confrontation with them. At the same time, we need to strengthen cooperation with America as quickly as possible and develop a common negotiation position and strategy. At the same time, we need to advocate for expanding the negotiation format involving, first of all, the European Union, as well as Turkey and even China. These can at least partially neutralize the negotiation risk that will arise from Donald Trump. So Trump probably understands that not all Americans like Vladimir Putin, but he went this way because he wanted to get a result, peace agreements, quickly and without much effort. He thought that by putting pressure on the Ukrainian leadership, he would get this result, but he didn't succeed. Ukraine didn't give in. He didn't succeed in squeezing any agreements to surrender from Kiev. Trump initially had the wrong idea about Ukraine. He said that Zelensky was a mediocre comedian. That is, this is probably his attitude towards Zelensky. But Zelensky, by the way, withstood 3 years of war at the head of a country that was attacked by a nuclear power and the largest country in the world. I'm not sure that Trump would have endured such thing. And in general, in fact, not every person would have been able to go through such a thing, regardless of what Zelensky's previous professions were. 3 years of resisting attack by a nuclear power is generally a normal indicator, and he deserves respect. But at the same time, Trump believed that Zelensky would give in and run away. Today, American pro Republican media outlets are writing that everyone in the White House dreams of Zelensky leaving Ukraine as soon as possible and ending up somewhere in Paris. Imagine, this is literally a repetition of what Vladimir Putin dreamed of exactly 3 years ago when he addressed the Ukrainian military and said, "Size power, because it will be easier for me to come to an agreement with you than with drug addicts and Nazis," led by Zelensky. So, this is exactly what Trump is repeating. And this is what exactly Putin said 3 years ago. So, reapproachment with the Russian Federation is starting to put pressure on Trump. His ratings in the US are starting to burn from too close an approachment with Putin. Reapproachment of Putin. Trump's popularity has now gone down. Trump's international activity looks less and less adequate in the eyes of his own voters. People don't like what he's doing. It's not like Republicans are standing there waving flags and saying, "Come on, go ahead, suffocate this Kiev." Most Republicans support Ukraine, especially Republicans in the ruling class. Many are afraid to speak out now. Not everyone speaks out in support of Ukraine, and those who do speak out to do so in a way that doesn't offend Trump himself. They do not attack the president, but they attack Putin. For the most part, the Republicans say Putin is criminal. He must be punished. Ukraine must not be punished. And if the American president decides to completely stop aid to Ukraine, I think a very serious wave of protests will begin within the Republican establishment. People will say that Trump has already crossed all the lines. It is one thing to threaten, scold, and say some nasty things about Zelensky, but it is another thing to simply refuse to support your ally when he really needs it. That is, refusing to support Ukraine will cost Trump quite a lot. Look what happens. Now Putin has three allies in the world. These are Iran, China, and North Korea. You can also include Belarus. And now the United States of America has joined them. The Americans don't like it. They don't want to be in the same company as North Korea and Iran. The Americans don't like it to believe that an American president should make the concession to a Russian dictator like that. At the same time, Trump is still trying to escalate. He insults Zelensky, wants to stir up a scandal, wants to hear some screams from the Ukrainian side to say, "You see, Ukrainians are inadequate. That's why I threat them so harshly. Ukrainians don't like us. That's why we deny them weapons." But Ukraine is actually acting quite wisely now. The Ukrainian leadership is not going to conflict. Everyone speaks quite respectfully about Trump, although, in my opinion, he doesn't deserve such respect. Okay, here is a little more about the natural resources that Donald Trump desperately wants Zelensky to sign as soon as possible. The US and Russia agreed this week to work on a plan to end the war in Ukraine at the high level talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukrainian and European representatives were pointedly not invited to attend. Donald Trump entered the talks seemingly ready to capitulate on the two key points that Russian President Vladimir Putin had been punishing for. Russia opposes Ukraine's NATO membership and wants to keep Ukrainian territory seized after the 2014 invasion of Crimea. The sharp shift in Washington's approach to Ukraine's sovereignty and security has undermined Western Ukrainian unity on acceptable parameters for ending the war. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that Ukraine will not accept a deal without them. Former US National Security Advisor John Bolton said that Trump has effectively surrendered to Putin. European leaders are also worried after being excluded from talks in Saudi Arabia. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said this doesn't mean that peace can be dictated and that Ukraine must accept what is offered to it. Many believe that Trump's moves to split this transatlantic front against Russia send a signal that Washington is abandoning its commitment to ensuring European security. But there is another important factor at play in Trump's actions: the intensification of global competition for key minerals. Trump wants to secure access to Ukraine's vast reserve of these minerals, even if it means breaking with traditional US allies in the European Union. Why Ukraine minerals are so valuable? According to some estimates, Ukraine has deposits of 22 out of the 34 minerals designated by the European Union as crucial and critical. These include lithium and cobalt used in the production of batteries, scandium used in the production of components for the aerospace industry, tantalum used in the production of electronic equipment, titanium used in the airspace, medical, automotive, and marine industries, nickel ore, magnesium, beryllium, hafnium, magnesium, zirconium, and others that use in airspace, defense, and nuclear industries. As you know, China currently dominates the global supply chain of these minerals. It is the largest source of imports to the US of 26 out of the 50 minerals classified by the US Geological Survey as critical. This explains Trump's offer last week to give the United States 50% of Ukraine's rare earth minerals as a compensation for the billions of dollars in arms and support it has provided to Kiev since the start of the war. The problem, however, is that at least 40% of Ukraine's minerals are located in the eastern regions of the country, in the eastern Donetsk and Lugansk regions, which are occupied by Russia. Other sources put the figure as high as 70%. So concerned about Ukraine's territorial integrity, Zelensky publicly rejected the US demand for half of Ukraine minerals, as the offer didn't include security guarantees that Kiev desperately need. It reportedly only vaguely mentioned the payment of future aid. In response, White House National Security Council spokesman Brian Hodges said President Zelensky is short sighted about the great opportunity that the Trump administration has presented to Ukraine. Will the deal be signed? The big question before any peace talks in Ukraine is whether Trump is commercially minded enough to accept a counteroffer from Putin. With Russia now controlling large swaths of Ukraine's mineral rich eastern regions, Putin may be willing to offer Trump an exclusive deal to provide the most important minerals in exchange for formal US commitment not to restore Ukraine's pre 2014 borders and to keep the country out of NATO. Meanwhile, Ukraine might be looking to strike its own mineral deal with European countries. in exchange for their continued support. Prime Minister of Ukraine has expressed his country's willingness to form joint ventures with the European Union in this area. So, the European Commission has recommended a policy to encourage Ukraine to export these minerals to the European Union. In response, the Kiev authorities have begun developing the necessary regulatory measures to integrate Ukraine into the European Union resource strategy. With so many states seeking access to its mineral, Ukraine finds itself in an extremely complex and intractable geopolitical situation. Zelensky's bet on the European Union over the US might be the right one, given the growing divide between Brussels and Washington over Ukraine's future. So, the loss of the US as a source of weapons will be a tangible but not crucial pain for us, provided that the EU allocates Ukraine enough money. The effect of Washington's demarches will be noticeable, but not as crucial. Secondly, European weapons solutions are, in their mass, closer to the requirements of the Russian Ukrainian war. If we take the basis of our war, drones, then they mostly make them ourselves. Components for the US are used fragmentarily and mostly have analogs in other countries. Even if we consider the premium segment of expensive reconnaissance drones, here European manufacturers dominate American ones in supplies and are very flexibly adapting to the current war. Of course, American communications equipment manufactured by Silvus is considered the best in the world in its segments, but its use as an expensive solution is quite limited. And it's not without competitors. The most important thing that the US has for drones is a Starlink, but there is no word from the US about any planned hostile actions against Ukraine. So there is no talk of forcibly disconnecting Starlink for Ukrainian yet. Although such a possibility should be taken into account now and work intensively to find alternatives. The US, judging by the current mood in the capital, wants to partially turn into China in this war, sell defense solutions for money, get maximum short term material profit. The main thing is that the US doesn't start playing on the side of Moscow, as has often happened. Thus, if the US doesn't switch from a policy of distancing itself from the conflict to open pressure on Ukraine in the interest of the Russian Federation, the domestic drone industry will be able to continue working, and the forces of unmanned systems will be able to receive what they need. As for classical weapons, in my opinion, Europe is ahead of the US in terms of armored vehicles and cannon artillery. The Bradley infantry fighting vehicles is a great machine, but the Swedish CV-90 is no worse, and in many ways even better. The same is true when comparing the Abrams and Leopard tanks. The US doesn't have such armored personnel carriers as Europeans have. There are no such a self-propelled mortar system with automatic guidance. Most of the NATO 155 mm self-propelled guns are also not American. Someone might say that now it doesn't matter as much as before traditional weapons are fading into the background. Statistics come from one area or another that the majority of hits are carried out by drones, and Ukraine is making millions of them. But the development of war doesn't stop, and it is possible that in the coming years, anti-drone means will be able to massively return the good all tanks, infantry vehicles, and armored personnel carriers to the battlefield. And in fact, the leading manufacturers of such equipment are European and Israeli companies whose products have already become the gold standards at the front. The question remains open whether Ukraine will be able to continue to receive for money, the excellent HIMARS missile systems or their analogs from the European allies. Also, whether the Europeans will be able to continue to transfer to us American weapons such as Patriot systems, etc. The loss of the US as a source of weapons for Ukraine will be a tangible, but not as critical pain. We can fight without the US and even win, provided that Europe behaves briskly. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.